My dad actually stood up at my cousin's engagement party, clinked his glass for attention, and announced to a room full of relatives that his son works in pajamas and calls it a career. Everyone laughed loudly. I can still hear it, the way the sound bounced off the banquet hall walls, the way my face burned while I forced a smile. He didn't stop there either. He went on about how real men wake up at 6 a.m., put on boots and build something with their hands, not sit at home clicking buttons in their bedroom. And the worst part? He looked directly at me while he said it. So tell me, was I wrong for what I did next? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have made him regret humiliating you in front of the entire family? To understand why that moment hurt so much, you have to understand my dad. Growing up, he was the definition of old school. He worked construction his whole life. Long hours, rough hands, permanent back pain by the time he hit 45. He believed in sweat. He believed in calluses. He believed that if you weren't physically exhausted at the end of the day, you hadn't earned your money. I used to admire that about him. When I was a kid, I'd sit on the porch steps waiting for his truck to pull into the driveway, and I'd run up and hug him even though he smelled like dust and diesel. He'd pat my head and say, "One day you'll understand what hard work is." The problem was, I did understand hard work, just not the way he wanted me to. I was never the athletic outdoorsy type. I liked computers. I liked taking things apart and figuring out how they worked. When other kids were outside playing football, I was inside building my first website on a beat-up laptop. I bought with money from tutoring. By high school, I was freelancing, designing logos, editing videos, doing small programming jobs online. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I loved the freedom. I loved the creativity. I loved that I could build something from scratch with just my mind and a keyboard. My dad hated it. He'd walk past my room, see me in sweatpants at my desk, and shake his head. "You're wasting your life staring at that screen," he'd mutter. "Go get a real job." When I tried to explain that I was making money, that I had clients, that I was learning valuable skills, he'd just laugh. "That's not a career. That's a hobby. A man needs stability." But I kept going. I went to college for computer science, paid part of my tuition with freelance work, and by the time I graduated, I had built a small but steady stream of online income. After graduation, instead of applying for traditional office jobs, I decided to go all in. I started my own digital marketing business. I worked from home. Yes, sometimes in pajamas. Yes, sometimes at midnight. But I was working. The first year was brutal. I barely slept. I chased clients. I sent cold emails. I got rejected constantly. There were months I barely broke even. My dad saw those months and smirked like it proved his point. "Told you," he'd say. "You should have gone into something solid. Maybe electrical work. I could have gotten you an apprenticeship." But I didn't quit. By year 2, something shifted. One of my clients referred me to a bigger company. That company brought in 2 more. My revenue doubled, then tripled. I hired a part-time assistant. I turned my bedroom into a proper office. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was thriving, quietly. The thing is, I never bragged. I never sat my dad down and showed him my bank statements. I thought eventually he'd just notice. I thought once he saw I wasn't asking him for money, once he saw I paid my own bills and even helped my mom with some expenses, he'd respect it. He didn't. To him, if I wasn't leaving the house in steel-toed boots, it wasn't real. Fast forward to my cousin Amir's engagement party. The whole family was there. Uncles, aunts, second cousins I barely knew, family friends. It was one of those big rented banquet halls with bright chandeliers and loud music. People were dressed up, taking pictures, posting everything online. I was actually in a great mood that night. Earlier that week, I had signed my biggest contract, yet 6 figures for a year-long marketing campaign with an international company. I remember looking at that contract on my screen and just sitting there in silence, overwhelmed. I had done it. All those late nights, all those doubts. It was finally paying off. At the party, a few cousins asked what I was up to these days. I told them I ran a digital marketing agency. Some were impressed. Some didn't really understand. One uncle jokingly asked if I could make him famous on Facebook. We laughed. Then my dad got up to give a toast. At first it was normal. He congratulated Amir. He told a few embarrassing childhood stories. Everyone was smiling. Then somehow, the topic shifted to the younger generation. He started talking about how times have changed, how people don't value hard work the way they used to. And then he said it. "You know, my son here, He gestured toward me with his glass. He works from home. In pajamas. People chuckled. I felt my stomach tighten. He kept going. Apparently clicking a mouse all day is a career now. Working in pajamas isn't real work if you ask me. The room erupted in laughter. Some of my cousins looked at me awkwardly. A few tried to hide their smiles. My mom looked down at her plate. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. In that moment, I felt like I was 12. Again. Small. Dismissed. Embarrassed. I forced a tight smile and raised my drink like I was in on the joke, but inside, something snapped. It wasn't just about the pajamas. It was about years of belittling. Years of him acting like I was lazy or unserious. Years of him telling relatives I was still figuring things out, when I was actually building something real. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't confront him at the party. I went home, took off my blazer, and sat at my desk in silence. I stared at the contract I had signed. 6 figures. More than my dad made in 2 years. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue with him. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to prove him wrong in the most undeniable way possible. Over the next few months, I worked harder than I ever had. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed the validation. I expanded my agency. I hired 2 full-time employees. I rented a small office downtown, even though I didn't technically need one. I wanted something tangible, something my dad couldn't dismiss as just a bedroom setup. When the office was ready, I invited my parents to see it. My mom was excited. My dad seemed indifferent. He walked in, looked around at the glass walls, the modern desks, the big screen displaying campaign analytics, and said, "Nice place." That was it. No pride. No apology. So that's the situation I was in. Years of quiet dismissal, public humiliation, and a father who refused to acknowledge that his son had built something, successful in a completely different world than the one he understood. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and really think about it. If you were in my shoes, would you keep trying to earn his approval? Or would you stop caring completely? Would you confront him directly? Or let your success speak for itself? Comment below what you would have done, because what I did next changed our relationship forever. A few weeks after they visited my office, my dad's construction company announced layoffs. The economy had slowed down, and projects were drying up. My dad, after 30 years with the same company, was let go, I found out from my mom. She called me one evening, her voice shaky. "Your father's home early," she said. "They let him go." I drove over immediately. When I walked in, he was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. Those same rough, calloused hands that had defined his identity for decades. For the first time in my life, he looked lost. He tried to play it off. "It's fine," he said. "I'll find something else." But weeks passed. Nothing came through. He wasn't as young as he used to be. Companies wanted younger workers, cheaper workers. His pride wouldn't let him apply for anything outside his field. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. I had more work than I could handle. And I needed someone reliable to manage operations, scheduling, vendor coordination, logistics for our small office renovations and setups for clients. One evening, I sat across from him at that same kitchen table. The air felt heavy. "I could use some help at my company," I said carefully. He frowned. "Doing what? Clicking a mouse?" I swallowed my pride. "Managing projects, overseeing setups, working with contractors when we redesign client offices. It's real work." He didn't respond right away. "I can pay you well," I added. "Better than what you were making." The irony hung in the air between us. For a second, I thought he'd explode. I thought he'd accuse me of pitying him. But instead, he just looked tired. "You'd hire me?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He took the job. The first few months were awkward. He struggled with emails, with scheduling software, with the idea of taking direction from me. But he was good at what he did. He understood construction. He understood logistics. He brought a level of practical knowledge my team didn't have. Slowly, something shifted. He started asking questions about the marketing side of things. He'd sit in on meetings. He'd watch how campaigns translated into revenue. One day, he saw the monthly profit report. His eyes widened. "This is from this month?" he asked. "Yeah." He leaned back in his chair, silent. A few nights later, we were locking up the office together. He hesitated before getting into his truck. "I was wrong," he said. I almost didn't hear him. "About what?" I asked. "About your job, about all of it." He cleared his throat. I didn't understand it. So I made fun of it. It wasn't a grand apology. There were no tears, but for my dad it was huge. I shouldn't have embarrassed you like that, he added. At the party. That was the moment I didn't know I'd been waiting for. I realized something then. He hadn't mocked me because he thought I was worthless. He mocked what he didn't understand. His whole identity was built on physical labor. Seeing me succeed in a world, without it probably felt like a threat to everything he believed. Our relationship isn't perfect now. He still makes jokes about my pajama empire, but there's pride in his voice when he says it. He tells his friends his son runs a company. He asks me for advice about investing. Sometimes he even brags. And here's the part that might surprise you. I never threw that party speech back in his face. I never humiliated him the way he humiliated me. I could have. I had every opportunity when he needed the job, but I chose not to, because proving him wrong was enough. If there's any lesson in this whole mess, it's this. Sometimes people dismiss your dreams not because they're impossible, but because they're unfamiliar. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success. So tell me, was I wrong to hire him? Was I wrong to keep pushing for his approval for so long? Or did I handle it the right way? If you were on my side like this video, if you believe in building your own path, even if it looks different from what your family expects, hit subscribe for more stories like this. And seriously, I want to hear your final thoughts on this whole situation in the comments. I read more of them than you think. I'll see you all in the next story.